for making your time. Good morning. Hope you're all staying safe. So today we have Christy Lee with us. As most of you know that she was the first female engineering technical steward for structures at Caterpillar. So
Mhm.
today we're going to know more about her journey, her challenges, and we're going to celebrate her. So let's get started. Okay. So here is our event outline. I'm gonna give a brief introduction about Christy Lee, and then she's gonna talk about her journey as a technical steward. And then with the event notice, we did send out a survey because we wanted to know what the most challenges that women these days are facing in their professional career. So we got some really interesting results. So Christy Lee is gonna address those, and then it is open for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can post them in the meeting chat, so Christy will try and answer them for you. So Christy Lee graduated from the University of Missouri, Rolla, in 1998, and she has been with Caterpillar ever since. She took up the role of engineering technical steward for structures at Caterpillar, where she happened to be the first female in her group. As a part of her job, she provides technical support and training to engineers across Caterpillar. She also represents Caterpillar on the SAE Fatigue Design and Evaluation Subcommittee and International Institute of Welding Commission on Fatigue. She has a great passion for technologies and processes. Till now, she has developed over 10 new technologies, including simulation, testing, manufacturing, and materials technologies. As we all know that she is a very active member of SWE, and she volunteered many programs to introduce middle and high school students to STEM careers. So without any delay, I'm gonna let Christy take over. Christy, this virtual stage is all yours now.
All right. Thank you, Megana.
Okay.
All right. Is the presentation coming through?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. So, good morning. Thank you all for joining this morning and taking the time. I'm really excited to talk to you and share a little bit about my career journey to technical steward at Caterpillar. So, as Megana mentioned, I am the engineering technical steward for structures and fatigue at Caterpillar. And when we look at that engineering technical steward job role, one of the things that really surprised me was with the thousands of engineers that we have at Caterpillar, there are currently about 80 technical stewards across the enterprise, covering many different areas of expertise. So it's really a very, very small percentage of the engineers that we have at Caterpillar. This particular job role has been my someday job for about the last 15 years. Pretty early in my career, I was on my second position at Caterpillar. My supervisor at the time was promoted into this engineering technical steward role. And when he took that role, I looked at that job and said, I think that would be a really cool job to have someday. And now, about 15 years later, someday is finally here. So I've been with Caterpillar for 22 years in a variety of technical and leadership roles. So I actually started my career in our track type tractors division doing structural analysis. And I did that for several years, made what seemed to be a very natural progression into the testing side of the business and doing validation for on-machine structures testing. Um, After that, took my first step more along the leadership track and took a role as a Six Sigma Black Belt, and then spent some time doing research program management, particularly in the structures and manufacturing space. And then took the leap to go into supervision. I was an engineering supervisor for a little less than 5 years. And then before my current role, I moved over to drivetrain systems, to take a technical role as a senior engineering specialist for structures within the drivetrain organization. So I've had a variety of different positions and roles along the way. So one of the questions that I sometimes get is, what exactly does a technical steward do? When most people think of the technical steward job role, they think of a technical expert. So I provide technical support on a wide variety of structures and welding issues for groups all across the enterprise. I attend design reviews and provide feedback. I own and maintain corporate design guides related to structures. I am also co-owner of several corporate engineering specifications and standards related to structures and welding. I develop and deliver technical training. That's actually what I spent a very large portion of the first quarter of this year doing, was delivering technical training at several of our facilities. I am a sponsor, a stakeholder, or a subject matter expert for research projects in the structure space. Sometimes I may be all three. And I engage with external research and standards organizations to represent Caterpillar and to make sure that we stay current in our knowledge as a corporation of what's going on outside of Caterpillar and some of the research that's occurring in the structure space at universities or at other professional organizations. There's also a really strong leadership component to being a technical steward. So I have ownership of the technology strategy for structures. With that ownership, I make recommendations for how we allocate research funding in the structure space, so which projects we choose to run with our funding that we have available, and how much funding each of those projects will get. I make recommendations on patent filings and renewals. So as people submit ideas for patents and file INFs in the structure space, I chair a patent review board for my division to help make decisions about which of those ideas we pursue for patents. And once patents have been granted, I provide input on whether or not we pay maintenance fees on those patents as they come due. I facilitate the corporate structures technical community of practice. So a few times a year, I gather the broader structures community for the enterprise together so that we can share lessons learned from each other, updates on what's going on in different parts of the organization, new research findings and technologies, and a variety of different things. I participate in recruiting and interviewing. So when we have openings, specifically in my division, I will participate on interview teams and help make hiring decisions there. I'm also very active and have been for several years at interviewing at my alma mater, the Missouri University of Science and Technology. And finally, I participate in strategy discussions. So I am considered a member of my division manager's leadership team and participate in a variety of discussions with that team on the strategy for our organization and manufacturing at Caterpillar. So throughout my career, I've had some times where it seemed like things were really moving quickly in the right direction. I've had other times that I felt like I really wasn't going anywhere and I was feeling really stuck. So of course, over the course of 22 years, there have been challenges along the way. And today I'd like to share some of the lessons that I've learned as I've overcome those challenges in the hopes that it may give some of you some perspective, or maybe you can learn something from it. So lesson number one, it's good to have a map, but it's important to embrace the detours. And my detours started very, very early. So I wanted to design buildings and bridges. My degrees are in civil engineering. I have a bachelor's and a master's in civil engineering with an emphasis in structures. My love of engineering started in middle school when I went to an engineering camp and we built bridges out of toothpicks. I thought that was just the neatest thing in the world, and that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. My master's thesis research was on the seismic behavior of architectural glass. And as I was doing that research as part of my master's program, I spent a summer in Japan with a NIST program for graduate students working in their building research institute. learning about how they design structures for earthquakes. I think it probably goes without saying I don't use a whole lot of that at Caterpillar. So how on earth did I go from wanting to design buildings and bridges to working on construction and mining equipment? Well, I have a little bit of family history. So my grandmother worked for Caterpillar for many, many years. She was an administrative assistant in the parts facility over at Morton. So I grew up and heard her talk about Caterpillar and what a great company it was. I didn't think Caterpillar hired civil engineers, but when I went to the career fair my last semester of graduate school, I saw that they were interviewing civil engineers. So, based off of my grandmother's experience, I decided I'd take a chance and interview. I really didn't have any idea of what I might do at Caterpillar, but I went through the interview process and I got an offer from Caterpillar. And as I was comparing the offers that I had received from Caterpillar and some of the more traditional civil engineering companies, the Caterpillar offer was very attractive. So I took a chance and decided I'd go to work for Caterpillar um, with the thought in my mind that if I didn't like it, I could always go to a more traditional civil engineering kind of a job role in the future. And 22 years later, here we are. Um, so that was a pretty big detour that I'm really glad that I took. As I've gone through my career, one of the things that I found were some of my best job experiences weren't ones that I was really sure that I wanted in the first place. So I love being an engineer. I'm very technical. I liked that mindset. I wasn't really sure that I ever wanted to go into supervision. People management just didn't seem like something that I wanted to do. But throughout my career, I had an opportunity where I was actually in the Six Sigma black belt role at the time. And my division manager approached me and she says, I am looking for a supervisor for my structural simulation group and I want you to apply for the job. So I went ahead and applied for the job and I got it. I still wasn't sure at that point in time that I wanted to be a supervisor, um, but I figured I would try it and see how it went. And I really did learn a lot. I learned a lot about myself as a leader and where some of my strengths and some of my weaknesses are, um, particularly in the field of leadership. I also got a much broader perspective about how the business works. There are a lot of things as a supervisor um, that you get a little bit more information on and a little bit more insight on some of the bigger picture things with the company. And that was very valuable to me. Um, so, like I said, I did that for a little less than 5 years. Um, at that point in time, I was itching to get technical again because, like I said, I'm an engineer at heart. I love being an engineer. So I started looking for a technical opportunity to move into. And my manager and I were looking at some options. We actually had one option that we were actively trying to work a trade because the person in that role was looking for supervisory experience and I was looking to get back technical. And that didn't work out. We had some issues making that happen. But during that time, a job opening became available in drivetrain. They had had a lot of significant structural issues, had paid a lot of structural warranty. So the technical manager for lower powertrain determined that he needed somebody in his organization that had some structures experience. So I applied for that job. Really wasn't sure what I was going to do in drivetrain because I didn't know anything about gears and axles and transmissions and components that rotate. But he was looking for somebody with structures background. And from that standpoint, I fit the bill. So I applied for that job. I did end up getting that job and I was in drivetrain for 9 years. And that was really a good experience for me in a couple of ways. First, it introduced me to a much wider range of products. The drivetrain systems support almost every product line that Caterpillar has. So I had some experience working with product groups that I really wasn't even aware that we made at Caterpillar before I had moved to drivetrain. In drivetrain, a lot of the structures are castings and forgings. Most of my background was in fabrications. So I got to learn a lot about different manufacturing processes, about castings and forgings. I learned an awful lot about metallurgy um, through that time as well. Um, and really in that role, I was in a technical leadership role. So it gave me a really good feel for what it means to be a technical leader. And I think that that role in drivetrain and the supervisory experience as well were both key stepping stones to prepare me for this technical steward role. Because as I said, the technical steward role is really equal parts technical capability and leadership. And had I not had the leadership experience from supervision and really that technical leadership experience in drivetrain, I don't know that I would have been as well prepared for the technical steward role that I'm now in. Lesson number 2, look back so that you can confidently move forward. Self-doubt is something that I've struggled with over my career. From the results of the survey, it sounds like that's a common challenge for many of you on the phone. I still very clearly remember one of my early experiences in my career. I'd been working at Caterpillar for maybe a year and a half, and I was sitting in an NPI meeting where we were talking about the next generation of tractor that we were developing, and I was the structural simulation representative. So as we were having the discussion in this meeting, there came up some questions about how we needed to validate some of the new structural designs, and um, the NPI team leader for that tractor looked right at me and said, "Christy, you're the expert. What do we do?" I was terrified. I was not ready to be put into an expert kind of a role or position. And the thoughts that were going through my head were, my goodness, what do we do here? What if I make the wrong decision? And it was very challenging for me. And as I've grown in my career, there've frequently been times where I've been put into situations or meetings, and I wonder if I should speak up, if what I have to say is really valuable and will contribute to the discussion, or why they should listen to me. What background do I have? What authority do I have in this case? And one of the most powerful exercises I've ever done was actually suggested to me by a coach that I was working with as I was getting ready to look at what my next move was going to be coming out of drivetrain. And what she had told me was that a lot of times we as women don't really understand and value what we've accomplished. So she wanted me to sit down and list all of my accomplishments. And not only did she want me to list them, but she wanted me to put numbers behind them. So as I went through that, I started writing that down, and I learned that I had been involved with the development of more than 50 new product introduction programs on more than 25 different machine platforms. I've been a key contributor for finding root cause and addressing key structural issues on more than 15 product lines, more than 25 different issues. I'd managed more than $10 million of research funding. You start writing those numbers down and looking at it, and you start to realize that that is pretty impressive, and I really have done quite a bit. And I do have some credibility for what I'm talking about. So for me, that was a very powerful exercise to be able to look back and say, yeah, I really have done quite a bit. I really do have a lot of experience. There are some very good reasons why people should value my opinion and my insight on these situations. The other thing to remember is that you have accomplishments outside of work too. So some of you may have been involved with organizations like SWE or other organizations outside. All of those types of things really come together to give you a really broad range of experience. And I know that when I did that, I was really amazed at everything that I had accomplished. And I actually used that information for cover letters when I started applying for positions, including this technical steward position. I've used it for my resume. and a variety of things. And it's really good to review whenever I need a little confidence boost. So if I've got something going on as I stepped into this new role, with any new role, of course, there are times that at least I wondered, all right, I'm here now. Am I really ready for this? And being able to look back at that list of accomplishments with some pretty impressive numbers listed there in black and white helped give me the confidence to say, yeah, I've been through this. I am ready for this. I can handle this. Lesson number 3, see yourself in the role that you want. So the first thing here is really to be authentically you. It's really important to understand your strengths and your leadership style. And I think that's especially important for us as women in engineering, because in a lot of roles that we may be aspiring to, there aren't many people that look like us in some of those roles. We aren't very well represented the higher you get into leader or technical expert kind of roles. So it's really important that you understand who you are and what your strengths and your leadership style is. You want to continue to challenge yourself, of course, so that you can grow. But as you're doing that, play to your strengths. You'll be much more successful if you're playing to your strengths than if you feel like you're constantly trying to compensate for weaknesses or strengthen up areas that you feel are weak. And I think the most important piece of advice here is it's obviously important to look to those who you admire for inspiration or guidance. But if they have a leadership style that doesn't feel authentic to you, don't try to emulate those traits. You don't need to be the same kind of leader or the same kind of expert or the same kind of engineer that they are to be a good leader or a good expert or a good engineer. Take a look at what they're doing, get inspiration from them and learn what you can, but don't pick up things that aren't authentic to you, because that just causes just a lot of struggle and challenge if you're trying to be someone you're not. Related to that, I think it's really important to begin to think and act like the woman that you want to be. One of the key things that I've learned is that you really need to see yourself in your next level role before others will be able to see you there. And this really came through when I was in supervision and then later when I was providing hiring guidance. So as people are looking at the list of resumes or people when they're doing succession planning to fill future roles, one of the things that they look at is, do they have the kind of traits that I think they need to be successful here? Have they demonstrated that they can lead a team? Have they demonstrated technical competence or whatever those traits are that they're looking for? The people who are making the hiring decisions need to believe that you will be successful in that role to be able to give you a chance. And for them to believe that you can be successful, you need to be able to believe that you can be successful in those kinds of roles. A little trick that I learned that has been surprisingly helpful was when faced with a challenging situation, and whatever that may be, simply ask yourself, in my case, it was how would a technical steward approach this? If you're striving for something else, it may be how would a manager approach this? How would a team leader approach this? Or whatever that next level you are. How would a person in that position approach this? How would that person look at this? The interesting thing is you don't necessarily need to know the answer to that question, but simply by asking the question, it changes the way you think about the problem. So what'll happen is you're going to be more likely to demonstrate the kinds of traits that a person in that role would successfully demonstrate. And as you demonstrate traits of leadership or technical competence or decision making or whatever else you need to be successful in that next level role, other people will see it too. And they're going to be more willing to give you opportunities. And in fact, they're also likely to be more willing to approach you about those opportunities, because when they're putting their succession plans together and their short lists for who they want in these roles, your name will be more likely to be on that list. So I think that was very eye-opening to me when I first discovered this, but very important, that you need to be able to see yourself where you want to go so that others will be able to see you there as well. Lesson number 4, you don't have to go it alone. As women in engineering, I'm sure that all of you can relate to some extent that it can feel very isolating, being a woman in engineering. And I will say that it can get more isolating as you move into roles with greater responsibility. And because of that, I think it's really important to take time to get to know your coworkers and find common ground. And that common ground isn't always obvious, which is why sometimes it requires taking a little extra time and putting in some effort. And with that, it's important to make the effort to stay connected. So even as you've met people and you've connected with folks, our paths diverge as we take on different career challenges, but we always have opportunities to stay connected. Some great ways to do that are attending professional society meetings and events, including SWE, um, occasionally meeting friends and colleagues for lunch or after work. My goal is to spend some time meeting with either a small group or individually one-on-one with folks that I've connected with over the years, at least once a month. That's obviously very challenging right now since we can't meet in person. But at a bare minimum, I like to get together with folks at least quarterly, just to stay connected. And then finally, participate in social or networking events. And I know that sometimes this can be challenging. I am an introvert. So sometimes when these types of things come up, there's a part of me that really doesn't want to go. Um, but I usually find that when I do, it gives me an opportunity um, to really get to know somebody. I will usually find somebody and sit down and have a meaningful one-to-one conversation with somebody, either that I don't know very well, or that I haven't connected with for a long time, and I'm really able to make a good connection at those kinds of events. So as much as there have been times when I'm getting ready to go that I'm not sure I want to, I can't think of a time after I've gone that I've been sorry that I did. And it's okay to ask for help. So related to that last slide, it's important to grow and maintain your network so that you know who you can call. As I was getting ready to move out of drivetrain, I spent 9 years in that structures technical expert role in drivetrain. So by the time I was ready to leave, I was starting to feel quite stuck. And I was actually a little bit afraid that I might not be able to get out of drivetrain because I'd been out of structures for so long that people may have forgotten who I was. Um, so with that, I stepped out of my comfort zone and made a few phone calls to folks in my network, um, just to ask them if they would be willing to sit down and talk with me and share what opportunities they might have in their organization for somebody with my background and experience. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. But I will tell you that every single person that I called, and I was calling technical managers and chief engineers and folks that were pretty high up in the organization, every single one of them said, absolutely, I would be happy to talk to you. Just set up some time on my calendar. So that was pleasantly surprising. Um, I wasn't expecting that kind of response, but every one of them was more than happy to sit down and talk with me and learn a little bit more about what I had been doing in my background and share what was going on in their organization. And a lot of those were one-time discussions. A few of them were more frequent. I would touch base with them quarterly or so, um, because they were folks, in some cases, that had me identified on their list for succession plans for people in their organization. And in one case, it was a longer term mentoring relationship. And that was with my product manager. So we were discussing and talking about mentoring, and he said, "Oh, I'd be happy to be your mentor." So we were in a mentoring relationship for about 2 years. So don't be afraid to ask. People will be much more receptive than you're likely afraid that they will be. And related to that, also consider personal responsibilities when thinking about where you might need help. And I know that's been something that's been a struggle for me, and I think it's a struggle for a lot of us. That as women, a lot of times we still bear the brunt of the responsibility for maintaining the home and childcare and other tasks that are unrelated to work. Um, and I found that for my family, as we went through things, my husband works part-time, so he has a lot more time available than I do. Um, but it just didn't occur to him exactly where I needed help. So I needed to ask. Um, and that was something that went a long way to help maintaining a little bit better work-life balance. And he was more than willing to help. He just didn't know what to do. So I had to speak up. Um, and in some cases, I've known of several people who are in households where both people work full time. I've had several people tell me that the best investment that they've ever made was hiring somebody to come in and clean their house once a week or once every other week, or hiring out some other domestic tasks so they have more time to focus on their career and their family and the other things that they want to do. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And lesson number 5, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So, as much as it doesn't feel like it in the moment, being uncomfortable can be a good thing. Um, so, being different can often feel uncomfortable. And in many cases, I think a lot of us have experienced that. As women engineers, um, we were different going through school. If we're still in um, areas and roles that are highly technical in engineering, we may be the only woman or one of very few women in our work group or the only woman on our project team. So you definitely feel different. I know that some women engineers make choices to move outside of the traditional engineering and they move into other fields. They may move into marketing or parts and service support or HR or other areas where there may be more women. But a lot of times they're the only engineer. So the way that they approach problems and the way that they think about things is very different from the rest of their group. Um, so they can sometimes feel a little out of place. But it's important to remember that the benefits of being different can be huge. So your unique background and experience can provide valuable insight to your team. And this really struck me when I was going through black belt training. Um, so Six Sigma is all about making decisions based on facts and data, which engineers just comes naturally. It's what we've been trained to do. Um, and I didn't have at that point in time a whole lot of experience working at Caterpillar with folks that weren't in engineering. But there were folks outside of the engineering organization that were in my black belt class. And I realized going through that way of thinking isn't necessarily normal to anybody that hasn't gone through an engineering education. So that was a very eye-opening experience to me, that there's a lot of value in your unique background and experience. And your background and experience is probably more unique than you realize. And then, of course, for those of us who are in the technical, more traditional engineering roles, and being a minority as women, our willingness to be different can pave the way for those who follow us. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about participating in activities to introduce middle school students, particularly girls, to fields in STEM. I think it's really important to see representation. And the more normal it becomes to have women in on some of these project teams and in some of these technical fields, the easier it will be for the generations that come after us. Another important point is that growth only happens when we're outside our comfort zone. So in order to grow, we need to step out of our comfort zone and feel some discomfort. And as you progress in your career, the decisions that you're going to be asked to make become more difficult and they become less clear. And they may have larger implications on them. So it's going to be, you're going to be more uncomfortable as you're being asked to make those decisions because more will weigh in the balance. So to progress and to grow and to be successful, I think it's really important not to shy away from discomfort. I think we need to feel that, and we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's how we grow, that's how we develop, and that's how we lead. So those are the lessons that I've learned over my career. Hopefully you found some of that insightful, and like to know if anybody's got any questions.
Anyone who has questions can post them in the meeting chat, so Christy can answer those for you.
Christy, this is Susan Reeves. I just want to provide some feedback. Great job. Really good insight. So I really appreciated listening in on your take and your expertise and your history and experiences. So thanks for sharing.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
Hey, Christy, it's Amy Hammer.
Hi, Amy.
Loved your presentation. I have to say, our paths have crossed many times because my husband had the pleasure of working with you at different points in your career. And he has always spoken highly of you, technical aptitude and what you really bring to the teams. So seeing that you are a technical steward, I mean, just thrilled to, have seen you go through your career and see you at this point. And I'm gonna also say I'm just so disappointed that the technical steward is someone that I knew and came through a career with me. I just, I had really wanted Caterpillar to get female technical stewards sooner, earlier. We have such fantastic women that we have all stood on their shoulders to get us where we are today, and they're fabulous. And I'm just, it just makes me go, come on, Caterpillar, go faster. But
I believe me, I understand completely, and I agree with you. It's a shame that it has taken so long.
It has, but for the younger engineers that are coming behind us, all I can tell you is stay hopeful, stay driven, stay engaged, because, just looking at the talent that we have all around us, we have so much opportunity, and we're going to get there. We are going to get there. So thank you for sharing today, Christy. Loved your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you, Amy.
Hey, Christy.
Hey, how are you, Andrea?
Doing well. I also agree with Amy that I am beyond excited that you are in the role that you are in. I can definitely attest to being we always hear representation matters, and I can remember after you told me that you were a tech steward, it was just this quick, like, oh, maybe I could be a tech steward too. And I was kind of like almost taken aback. I was like, yep, representation matters, because I didn't expect to have that thought, but it was there. So definitely excited. But I liked your idea about writing a list of your accomplishments. You said you put numbers to it. What kind of numbers did you pull together for it?
So I actually went through and I counted the number of NPI programs that I'd been involved with. I counted the number of CPI issues that I had supported and contributed to. I counted the number of product lines that I'd supported. Being in drivetrain, I knew that it was probably a big number, but I didn't realize how big, because we touch so many different products. Because I had research program management responsibility, I figured out how much research funding I'd managed. I looked at how many people I had supervised. So I looked at everything that I could come up with that I could actually put a metric to.
Well, that's definitely a really cool idea. I had a mentor who once talked about this idea of, when you're looking at like kind of how you perceive yourself, you have to write essentially your tape of what you're saying to yourself of, is that something that I expect me to do? So an example back, when I was in calculus could be, my tape says that I tell myself is I'm good at math. And when I was in calculus, I take calculus tests and I would always, get points off for addition and subtraction. But since my tape said I'm good at math, I would take that in and just be like, oh, I was concentrating on calculus, not that, whatever, move on. But if my tape said I'm bad at math, you just see this as proof, right?
Yeah, so absolutely.
I love this idea of creating this list, because how do you rewrite your tape is you have to show yourself, build up that proof that like, yes, I'm capable of this. Because once you write that tape and have that filter, your actions should start aligning. So I really love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. And for me, one of the things in my tape was constantly, oh, it's not that big a deal. That wasn't such a big deal. And for me, it took putting numbers behind it to be able to say, man, how many people at Caterpillar have actually supported development of more than 25 product lines? Probably not very many. That's probably pretty impressive. Or when I said $10 million of research funding, really? Those numbers were for me what kind of got me past the, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal kind of a tape that was playing in my mind.
Christy, I don't know if you can see, but there's a couple of comments and questions in the chat.
Okay, let me look over there. Thanks, Susan. All right, so one of the questions is, what career moves did I consider but decide not to pursue? So in that case, so I had one, and it was actually shortly after I started working in validation. I had gotten a phone call from somebody who is an engineering manager at that time in another organization that I'd worked with previously, and she was looking for a design engineer in her organization. And I thought about that one. I was still relatively new in my testing role, and I didn't feel like I'd learned in that role everything that I wanted to learn. So I decided not to pursue that one. But that was one example of a role that I decided not to pursue. There were a few others when I was looking at where I was going to move out of drivetrain. So I was looking at the job boards to see what kind of opportunities were open. So I was looking at, I looked at a variety of opportunities. I looked at engineering manager one opportunities. Of course, I looked at tech steward opportunities. I actually had a discussion with Andy Daw over in purchasing about potential opportunities in purchasing. So I looked at a variety of things, but there were several job postings that I felt that I was probably reasonably qualified for, but I decided not to apply and not to pursue because I didn't really feel like they were moving in a direction where I wanted to go. So I really wanted to get back into the large structures part of the organization and community. So while there were some opportunities in drivetrain for engineering managers, for example, that I probably would have been qualified for, I decided that really wasn't where I wanted to go. I missed my structures people, so I wanted to get back into that part of the organization. And another question is, what would I be doing if not my current role? So there are a few things there. Like I said, I looked at engineering manager, so going back into the people leadership roles again. I consider that, and that may be something that I do go back to in the future at some point. But right now, I'm really enjoying being in the role that I'm in. Or I may have still been back in drivetrain, looking at things there and looking for different opportunities there with hiring right now. And over the last year or so within Caterpillar, having been kind of spotty, we'll say. It seems that there are periods where there are jobs that are open, and then there are periods that everything seems to clamp down. But probably either what I was doing before or back in a people management kind of role. So next one, how did mentors and sponsors play into my technical growth and career progression? So I think there are a couple of big things. I really do believe that mentors and sponsors are very important. I think the mentors, and for me particularly, both with the longer term formal mentoring relationships and even with some of the more casual, less frequent discussions, the mentors really helped me understand where opportunities were as I was growing, what skills I would need to develop to be ready for those opportunities. So it's one thing to look out there and say, hey, I want to be a technical steward someday. It's another thing to understand what that really entails and what kinds of skill sets are really required to be successful in that kind of role. And that was something really where mentors were very helpful. And I've had a variety of mentors. So I had, mentors, that were in my organization that could provide some insight. Through the ITDD mentoring program that we had for a couple of years, I had a year-long mentoring relationship with a technical steward. So he was able to give me some insight on really what the role entails and what kinds of skill sets are really necessary to be successful in that role. From a sponsorship standpoint, I think sponsors are equally important, but in a different way, because the sponsors are really sometimes the ones who are able to get you in front of people who are making hiring decisions. They're the ones that can help make you visible. So as I said earlier, to get some of the opportunities when hiring managers are looking, particularly now, where we've been at Caterpillar, and I suspect a lot of other places as well, in a period where there hasn't been a lot of movement for a long period of time. So when jobs do open up, there are a lot of people who apply. One of the jobs that I applied for in the last year had over 125 applicants that they had to narrow down to 4 to interview. So as you look at that, I think the sponsors are very, very helpful in helping get you the kind of visibility that you need to get into the mix to be considered for some of the positions and some of the growth. So I think that's one of the really big differences between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor can really help you understand how to grow and how to develop and what skill sets you need and where you might find opportunities to that. But a sponsor can really help get you visibility so other people who are making decisions about filling positions can see your skills and your ability and the growth that you've had. So the next question is, I mentioned a 15-year journey to my someday job. And did I model my career off of my manager who went into that role? And in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So he was, one of my engineering supervisor roles was supervising that group that he had previously. So to a point, I followed that role, but then I took a really big detour when I moved over to drivetrain. And honestly, that one was a little bit scary because I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get back into large structures, and if moving outside of that structure's community was perhaps going to limit me into getting into that tech steward role that I wanted back in the structures community, because there was a fear of being out of sight, out of mind. And I will say that, at least in my case, that was not the reality. It's a lot of our technical communities at Caterpillar, I feel, are pretty closely knit. So even if somebody moves outside the technical community for a while, particularly if they put in a little effort to maintain that network, I'm not sure that they ever really get forgotten. So next question, how do I tackle intensive work schedule, and how do I balance that with life outside of work? So my family, in terms of time management and priority setting. So for me, one of the things that's really important, and I will admit that it's a little struggle here, with a little more of a struggle with everybody here in the house, and not having physical separation between work and home. But my biggest thing was, when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I'm at home, I'm at home. So to be able to prioritize work and getting all of the stuff done that I needed as efficiently as possible at work, and then when I'm home, being fully present and engaged with my family at home. I will admit that I'm not always successful at that. Sometimes things will come up in the middle of the day when I'm at work, and it's something that's going on at home that I need to deal with. Sometimes things will happen when I'm at home, especially now, and there's something that needs to be addressed at work. But I try to maintain that separation as much as possible, so I can be fully present at whichever of the two spectrums I'm at. The other thing that I do is I actually put important things for home and my personal life on my work calendar, so I can block off that time. So I've taken days off to participate in, or chaperone field day and field trips for my son, because that was really important to him. And I put those on my calendar as far in advance as I possibly can. When he has soccer games in the evening, I will put those on my calendar, both as a reminder to me that I get the pop-up on Lotus Notes that says, oh, yeah, I got to get home. I need to leave the office, but also to protect some of that time from other people trying to schedule things. And then I ask for a lot of help. My husband does a lot of the work around the house, so that when I have my home time, it can actually be us doing things as a family, and having home time. And I don't feel like I'm spending all of my home time keeping things clean. So I will say that has been huge, is, like I said, having that help and asking that for that help, so that that the time that I do spend at home with my family is meaningful with my family, and doing things and building and maintaining those relationships. Next question is about, how long did I spend investigating and deciding on changing roles during my career? So it varied significantly as I was going through there. So my first job move at Caterpillar, when I moved from simulation to testing, my supervisor at the time called me into his office. We were having a one-on-one, and he told me, I'd been in his group for about 3 years at the time, and he said, I think it's time for you to move. I talked with this other manager over here in the testing group, and we're going to do a swap, so you're going to move over there the first of the year. So I didn't really have any consideration there. It was more or less a done deal when that one happened. So that one was pretty quick. But there were other ones when I was looking into the supervisory role. I deliberated on that one. I probably would have liked to have more time to deliberate than I did, because I really wasn't considering supervision at the time, and the job was posted. So I really had probably about a week to decide whether or not I was actually going to apply for that job while the posting was open. But with that, I spent some time talking about it. I talked with Amy's husband, Jeremy, some on that because he was a supervisor in a similar role at the time. I talked with the division manager who had asked me to apply. So I spent some time doing some research and some digging and a little soul searching to try to understand if that was something that I was interested in before I applied for that job. But obviously, I decided to go ahead and take the plunge and try it. But one of the things I found is that it was surprisingly easy at that level to move back and forth between managing people and being in a technical role. I was a little bit afraid that once I went down the supervision path, that was it. But that's really not the case. And I've known several people who have done similar types of things where they were in a supervisory role for a while and then moved back into a technical role. So I will say, Katie, that made the decision a little bit easier. It made me a little more willing to take a chance because I didn't feel like it was necessarily permanent.
Christy?
Yeah.
I think we're almost out of time.
Okay.
So, I mean, if possible, you can answer those questions offline.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share something real quick. So, these are our survey results, but I guess you pretty much covered everything in your presentation and even in the Q&A session. So, as you said, most of the people don't have confidence, not people, just women, in what they do. So, and this is an upcoming event from the Professional Development Committee. It's a virtual career fair. So check it out. And so on behalf of the PD committee, we are donating this book, which is called Rosie River Engineer, to the Peoria Library.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yep. So I hope you like the book. I don't know if you have read it, or I can send you a copy.
I have not, but it looks like a good one.
Okay. Yep. Okay. And who are in the meeting, people, thank you so much for attending this. And at the start of the event, I forgot that I didn't introduce myself. This is my first event I'm leading, so I was a bit nervous. So hi everyone, this is Meghna. So I work for Caterpillar as an emissions certification engineer in the ERC department. So that's about me. I'm sorry for not introducing earlier.
You did awesome, Megan.
Thanks,
Christy.
Yes. Thank you. You did awesome. Went very well, and I was very happy we were able to do it virtually. As I was a little worried when all of the shelter in place came in that we might have to cancel. So I'm very glad that we didn't.
Yeah, that's a great